enforcers of law who are tasked with maintaining public order, protecting individuals and property, and preventing and investigating crimes. That is what being a police officer means, or at least that's what they are trying to do. Instances have aroused where police officers have misused their authority, employed excessive force, and violated people's rights, particularly those from marginalized communities, leading to distrust and fear of law enforcement. Are they subjected to such power? What are the legal repercussions for them? However, and most of all, would they be treated differently when compared to the masses? Join us as we take a closer look at two of the most uncanny cases that could make question the judicial system as a whole. Our first case kicks off with the case of Harold Hill, which is just a perfect example of how our justice system can go wrong. This case definitely checks all the boxes, including a horrific rape and murder, as well as a mishandled conviction, you name it. So then what went about? Let's start with the so-called beacons of justice, Kenneth Bordeaux and John Halloran, the detectives who were assigned to the case and the beacons of law. They were the ones who managed to extract a confession from Peter Williams, who was later discovered to have been in custody when the crime was committed. How did they even produce a fabricated confession from someone who wasn't even present? Hill claims he was physically and mentally tortured until he confessed to crimes he didn't commit. Is this the kind of conduct we anticipate from our law enforcement personnel? The trial itself was held when Hill was 31 years old, despite the fact that he was only 16 at the time of the crime and was therefore tried as an adult. At this point, it's just not fair, and it's incomprehensible what Hill is going through. Given that neither of the defendants had a criminal history prior to the incident, this is an intriguing move by the prosecution. Hill and Young were given a life without parole sentence after the jury found them guilty of the murder. However, 13 long years later, DNA tests showed that neither of the defendant's cellular components found under Kathy Morgan's fingernails, nor the hair found at the crime scene matched either of them. Imagine the sheer suffering Hill endured for something he didn't do. It continues to amaze me how Hill managed to hang on to his life. The prosecutors disputed the findings despite this evidence, claiming that the hairs had nothing to do with the crime and that the cellular material might have come from sweat or drool that the recovery teams had left behind. Even in the face of such overwhelming evidence, it's shocking that the prosecutors were so resistant. Young was killed in a hit-and-run incident shortly after Harold and Young were finally let out of jail. This almost leads us to believe that this is almost a plot to clip both of them. Hill, on the other hand, accused the city of Chicago, the police, and the two detectives involved in the case of coercing a confession and violating his civil rights in a complaint he filed against them. The case was resolved for $1.25 million, of which Hill received $500,000 and the remainder was paid to the lawyers. It's surprising that the detectives were only asked to make a pitiful $7,500 payment for their roles in this whole fiasco. You think that's all? Wait until you hear this. It should be noted that Hill is currently serving a 27-year sentence after being found guilty once more of an unrelated charge of armed robbery. In spite of this, it is obvious that Harold Hill was let down by the legal system in the past. This case emphasizes the need for justice system reform to prevent erroneous convictions and make sure that those who abuse their power are held accountable. Starting with the investigation and continuing through the trial and conviction, the Harold Hill case is a tragedy of errors. Hill was wrongfully detained for 13 years, and because the system made him a criminal, he was never given the opportunity to adapt to life outside of prison. He was completely screwed over by the system, and the police only received $7,500 each. When police officers commit acts like the ones they did, they should be imprisoned for a minimum of the same amount of time as the victims they imprison. Up next, we have an oddball in the form of Sergeant Mario Cardona versus Daniel Garza. After being thrown and pinned to the ground, Daniel Garza was rendered helpless. Officer Mario Cardona, a longtime friend of Garza's, was on the verge of breaking his wrist. Confronting a criminal and keeping him confined is one thing, but putting a civilian without a reason is shocking. Garza recalled, I was trying to be a man and trying to hold in the pain, but man, that wrist lock hurts. He's just bending it and bending it. But why did Cardona go so far as to nearly break his wrist? His actions were apparently driven by rage toward Garza, whom he accuses of attempting to kidnap his stepdaughter. But are cops subjected to such an authority in the first place? It appears that the two men had a long history together because Garza had once dated Naomi Villanueva, the stepdaughter of Cardona. Villanueva left her parents' home to live with a friend because the relationship had reached its breaking point. However, Villanueva was allegedly taken from her friend's home in May 2015 by Garza without her consent and brought to her parents' residence in Whittier, where Cardona lived across the street. Garza was performing pilates in his garden when Cardona saw him and told him to go to the street. Cardona started his assault as soon as Garza sat down. Garza claimed that he was not the aggressor, and a neighbor who saw the incident attested to Garza's innocence. As soon as they arrived on the scene, the sheriff's deputies saw redness on Garza's face, bruises and abrasions on his knees, and redness on his wrist. After Garza complained about Cardona, the city of Los Angeles, Chief Beck, and Cardona were named as defendants in a federal lawsuit. Garza claimed that he had been the victim of a false arrest, an arbitrary search and seizure, overuse of force, an assault and battery, negligence, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The trial also featured a video of the incident captured by one of Garza's neighbors. They had made up a story of what had happened to make him look like a hero, and me look like a criminal, Daniel Garza. The hearing was presided over by U.S. District Judge Stephen V. Wilson, who heard former Deputy City Attorney Michael Amarian speak in defense of the city. Cardona was found to have acted maliciously as an off-duty officer by the jury, and on June 26, 2017, he was ordered to pay Garza $210,000 in damages. In addition, the court added $664,000 in attorney's fees and $26,000 in post-trial costs. The city of L.A. refused to take responsibility for Cardona's actions and even refused to indemnify the officer, forcing him to pay for the charges out of his pocket. Jim DeSimone, Garza's attorney, claims, "This is the problem with the LAPD. This is why people are out on the street." The incident serves as an example of how police can abuse people and get away with it. In this instance, however, Garza was able to confront the authorities who had infringed upon his rights and prevail in his lawsuit against Cardona. It is clear that police officers cannot get away with using excessive force against citizens after the jury found Cardona guilty of malice. It is important to note that this case also emphasizes how crucial it is for citizens to be aware of their rights and to speak out against law enforcement when they believe those rights have been violated. Garza's decision to accuse Cardona of using excessive force and file a complaint against him demonstrates that people can take legal action to stop police brutality. What do you think of these cases? Which do you think is most unfair? Sound off in the comments below and make sure to let us know if we missed out on anything. While you are at it, make sure to hit that subscribe and leave a like to never miss an update from us. Thanks for watching.